Let's take a look at Eastern Africa. Most images we see of it are these ones. Dry and dead. Droughts and desertification. Not a great place for life. Farmers in the 1970s in Kenya thought the exact same thing. So they decided to bring a little bit of the tropics of South America to Kenya to feed their animals during the dry season. They looked for a tree with deep roots and lots of photosynthesis so that it could actually survive the dry season and also provide food and nutrients to the cattle that they raised. The perfect tree was quickly found, the Mathenge Tree, Prosopis juliflora. Its deep roots could very easily get to the groundwater and hold the ground against desertification, and its green leaves could easily help the cattle survive in the winter. However, like New York in the 1970s, it all went horribly wrong. The tree was quickly deemed a problem as it drove away most of the native grasses and messed with agricultural fields by draining all the groundwater. All around a pretty bad situation. When introduced species has this kind of negative effect, we call it an invasive species. Today we will be talking about how researchers at Rhodes University and other researchers all over the world are working to combat this tree in the most effective way possible, so that the landscape can go back from this, a Mathenge-filled Kenya, to this, a beautiful grassland again. My name is Joost and this is Biolens, where we dive into a current biological topic that people are working on right now. Today, that is biocontrol. Controlling a plant might seem easy at first. They're pretty big, they don't move, and their seeds are quite easily discovered often. In reality, it's more difficult than we think. There are two main ways that people control plants at this moment. Take for example a garden. You might go towards the weed plants and just yank them out. For instance, if you want to take out the nettle in your garden. Another one is chemical control, which is spraying a chemical on the plant so that it dies pretty quickly. You can also treat the ground with a certain chemical to make sure the plants don't grow there, but that is kind of an environmental hazard, so people don't often do that anymore. This mechanical and chemical control both have its flaws. Chemical control is very, very expensive and hazardous because you often use too much of the chemical. And mechanical control is very difficult to get it right the first time because you might just look over a tiny specimen that you don't think is the plant just yet. To get into this third new way of removing plants, I have to go a bit more in depth into how a species becomes an invasive species. The main principle behind this is that the introduced organism is as good or better than a native organism in the same niche at survival. This might sound a little bit vague and far-fetched, so I've split it up into three aspects. The sun aspect, the prey aspect, and the hunter aspect. The sun aspect is everything abiotic, so this is just the environment, like temperature or rainfall or groundwater levels or permafrost levels or something like that. A species that lives there needs to be in some way adapted to these environmental conditions in order for them to survive there. The prey aspect is whether the invasive species sees any of the native species as prey. So this could, for example, be you introducing a tiger to the savannah, then the zebra would be the prey aspect of the tiger. The hunter aspect is the other side of the coin from the prey aspect. It's that any of the native species see the introduced species as prey. So this could be a zebra you introduce to the Congo, or a zebra that you introduce to the Asian rainforests, where they encounter the same tiger, and then the tiger is the hunter aspect for the zebra. To make this a little bit more clear, I've taken an example of the Asian hornet in the Netherlands. The Asian hornet has been a problem for several years, and we're just going to go through each of the aspects. So first, the sun aspect. The environment where it originally came from is Southeast Asia to East Asia. This is a temperature from anywhere from subtropical to tundra, high in the mountains. So the temperate climate of the Netherlands, where it often doesn't get below freezing, is quite favorable for them. Then we get to the prey aspect. It preys on honeybees, on small wasps, on ants, that kind of stuff. So prey are abundant here in the Netherlands. Then we get to the hunter aspect. Normally in the Netherlands, hornets are hunted by badgers, bears, hedgehogs, and skunks. Raccoons are also on the list, but raccoons, I've never seen a raccoon in the Netherlands. I've also never seen a bear in the Netherlands. I don't think we have any. So badgers, skunks, and hedgehogs it is. But the thing is, these three animals don't really hunt Asian hornets actively. They hunt normal hornets, but not Asian hornets. So this means that the hunter aspect is out of balance, which means that the hornet was able to go haywire, take over massive swathes of land, and get rid of most of the honeybee population in some places. So the hornet example is one of many examples where one of the three components is the leading factor to causing a species to become invasive. But how does an Asian hornet in the Netherlands refer back to a South American tree in Kenya? It's because the story of the Mathenge tree is pretty similar to that of the Asian hornet. It has minerals and water, which is the only thing that plants need for food, and sunlight. There's abundance of sunlight in Kenya. It is suited to the environment because it was especially picked that it could survive the pretty diverse temperatures of East Africa, which means that the sun and the prey aspect have both been accounted for. So then we come to the hunter aspect. The hunter aspect is the only one that's missing again. Because the Mathenge tree has a lot of sugar, so teeth fall out from bigger herbivores, and also none of the insects have adapted to it specifically, so they eat it less. Which means that that is the part that is in disbalance. And the fact that no natural enemies, which is the missing hunter aspect, is often the case for invasive species. It means that the scientists have actually come up with a name for that. It's called the enemy release hypothesis. The idea that invasive species are less impacted by enemies, for example the herbivores for the Mathenge tree, than native species. It's called the enemy release hypothesis because it's literally you get released from your natural enemy, so you go haywire. But how does this relate to controlling the tree? Because that's a whole other story. Well, knowing where the problem lies can also help you come up with a solution. And they did. The enemy control hypothesis means that we're introducing the natural enemy of a species to the region where it was introduced, will reinstate the balance and allow native species to come back to the region without much human interference. This hypothesis is the main idea behind biocontrol, today's topic, or biological control, which is the third way of controlling things, like biocontrol, mechanical control, and chemical control. But biocontrol might sound very counterintuitive. Introducing a new species to combat another introduced species that has become a problem. It might even sound a little bit dangerous. Like, how can you be sure that this predator will not become an invasive species itself, the new Mathenge tree of Kenya? Well, researchers at Rhodes have come up with a pretty long process to try to determine the risk behind introducing such a species. But which predator are we talking about here? Are we talking about some deer from South America? Or are we talking about maybe a capybara? Those live there. They're cool. No, we're talking about something that gets overlooked often and is quite a bit smaller. It is a weevil called Algarobius prosopis. Isn't it cute? But how do we make sure that it won't be a problem? There are two main tests that insects have to pass in order for them to be considered for release. The first one is the host specificity test. It basically sees how good insects are at surviving on native plants. They compare that to the invasive species and see how big a variety of plants the insect can overtake. Insects are often picked for this because they are highly specialized to their food source, often using specific chemicals made by the plant in their metabolism, which means that they can't survive without that plant because that's the only way they can get that chemical. The second test is the multiple choice test. This is to see whether the insect also prefers to live on the invasive plant. So this is done like this. You have if this was the Mathenge tree, and this was a native plant, and let's just say that this is also a native plant, you put them in a circle, around the Mathenge tree, and then you get an insect. Let's just use this little thing as an insect. You place it on the Mathenge tree, you wait a while, and after a while you can see whether it migrated to the other regions or if it stayed inside of the Mathenge tree. Let's just put these back where they belong, otherwise you can't see them. So only when insects succeed on both of these tests are they considered for release. And Algarobius prosopis actually got through both of these tests. They got introduced into South Africa, where they had a major impact on the Mathenge populations in South Africa. So they are showing great promise. Although there are some native diseases in Africa that might pose a problem in the future, so they are also looking for alternatives to maybe supplement Algarobius in its work. Even then, Biocontrol, it doesn't take away all the specimens of the Mathenge tree. Some Mathenge trees will still be there, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. They can still provide good sugar sources, they can still hold down the ground against desertification. It's just that they are now outcompeting the native grasses, so we want those back. And also a small pocket of these trees could help with maintaining the balance in future generations, because that small pocket could house species like Algarobius to serve as a backup for future invasions of the plant from, for example, Central Africa, that the seeds blow over and that the plant gets back. Then Algarobius can immediately be put into action again without actual human interference and can control the environment itself. So nature controlling itself. Isn't it beautiful? Anyways, if you want to learn more about current biological topics, be sure to subscribe to Biolens. We also have a website where we post research papers about the topics we discuss, so you can read more into them if you want to. Feel free to also post any more info you have on this situation in the comments, or even post new subjects that you want us to cover. Also, head over to our website where you can see some beautiful pictures of animals that I find on my daily walks. Stay learning, and don't forget to touch some grass.